grab a salad. You want a salad?
Yeah, so we really only truly do the sip. Now, occasionally I do get up and get a cup of coffee so that it is, truly over a drink. At conference, though, I do bourbon and it is at noon on Tuesday.
I
It's
love
but
it.
I figure at least I'm not alone drinking. I have a room of 300 and some people.
I love it.
Exactly.
Yeah, Mark, not at all. Never. They can make a virgin bourbon on the rocks. Everyone will get started in just a minute. We're going to let everyone get loaded in the session. And Brian and Jameson, you can probably already tell by the chatter, heckling is is promoted here. So
Love
if
it.
you get heckled, I can't be responsible for what you see coming in the chat.
No problem.
Okay, we're in the mortgage industry. There's always heckling, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
for sure. It's all in fun. It's all in
yeah,
fun.
yeah, fun heckling.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to the SIP. This is where conversation sparks connection, collaboration drives progress, and the industry leaders come together to share ideas, tackle challenges, and inspire change. Think of like having a drink with friends, whether that is a cup of coffee or an adult beverage. It's casual, energizing, and packed with insight to move us forward. And at the Mortgage Collaborative, we're committed to creating that space for innovation, growth, and meaningful impact. And today's episode is no exception. We're diving into real world strategies, success stories, and the kind of dialogue that remind us why our community matters. So thank you for carving out time to join us. And thank you to Argyle. Today's show is proudly sponsored by them and co-hosted by Argyle's Chief Operating Officer, Brian Geary, and joining him is Jameson Hawkins, Chief Operating Officer at Intercap Lending, the largest retail lender in the state of Utah. And it's a special one because it's all COOs, because I'm a former COO. So welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for
Excited to be
having
here.
us.
So I think that I don't know if this was intentional, but with a name like Jameson, I think Brian may have been strategic in the planning of joining the SIP with Jameson. No play on words there. So, Brian, let's kick things off. First, congratulations on a stellar 2024. I read all your amazing stats online with 58 new customers, 7 of the top 15 retail lenders, and 166% increase in VOIE volume. Hopefully those incredible statistics are carrying on through 2025. We'll talk about that. But for those who are tuning in who may not be familiar with Argyle, give us your value proposition and tell us a bit about the company and yourself.
Cool. Yeah, thanks again for having me. My joke was going to be we've got Jody and Jameson, so I'm feeling left out with the letter J here, but I'll power on. So yeah, I've been at Argyle for about 4 years. I've got a background in fintech and lending over the better part of the last 2 decades, and kind of working to drive innovation in those spaces. Argyle is the leading consumer permissioned verification platform. So we're kind of probably best known for payroll and VOIE, although we've recently launched a number of new products like banking, which powers assets and income and employment, as well as a new product that we call .voi, which I'll talk about later in the conversation. Mortgage is in our DNA, so everything that we are doing is GSE approved. We are integrating ourselves into the places that operators work and perform their functions every day. So that's the leading kind of POS and LOS platforms in the space. To your point, our product is going mainstream. We now have over 200 lenders that are leveraging our products in the market. And, really that's about, I guess, the value prop to kind of get to your point or your question is leveraging, this kind of user permissioned product to drive down costs, especially as compared to legacy providers, but also to drive efficiency in the process. A lot of our lenders that are leveraging this because they're using it kind of as an earlier stage in the process are able to decrease cycle times from app to approval, app to closing, and just kind of make decisions faster kind of earlier in the process.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was at a conference last week and one of my friends in the industry, Misty Snow, was talking about time. She's like, do we really need to, like, is anyone like pushing to close in less than 15 days? Is it necessary? And I would say, no, it's not necessary, but having a customer experience where they know that they qualify very early in the process and don't have to be hassled with income and asset documentation well into their journey is definitely favorable over waiting and then finding out at the last minute that you don't qualify. So little shout out and challenge there to my friend Misty Snow. Jameson, let's bring you in. Share a bit about your background and your role at Intercap Lending and how you first discovered Argyle.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. I am a Utah native. I actually had been a prior COO for a large mortgage company that was based out of the state of Idaho. Helped them grow from, more of a regional lender to a national lender. My background has been started in compliance back in 2015. Certainly, I gravitated more to the operational side of this business. Prior to that, I was in corporate banking. And so really driving efficiency and finding ways to be creative through product and innovation and service providers like Argyle has been something I've enjoyed in this business. But more than anything, it's helping customers in the American dream, right? Like focusing on really driving home the ability to serve our customers at the ground level in our local communities and being involved in finding ways to get creative and finding solutions there has been the most enjoyable part of my day to day. But also, outside of that, it's just focusing on surrounding yourself by the right people. And I feel like being a Utah native, knowing Intercap Lending even prior to being here, it was a very easy transition for me. And frankly, it was one of those where somebody had retired and I just knew them, they knew me. And so it felt like that perfect natural fit. And so now that I'm here, I've been here since January, being the largest retail lender in Utah, I quickly started to realize all the things that make us unique. But as I started to dive into some of those areas, cost savings, particularly around verifications, has been certainly a priority over the first few months of being here. And Argyle has been pivotal in helping us changing our workflows, changing our waterfall process around the verification process. And so, and so I'm just grateful they invited us to the call and we can kind of talk more about that today. So.
Yeah, so Jameson, when we did our prep call, we were talking about Intercap and how the focus has really been on retention. So retention as a growth strategy and being able to help your loan officers do more loans, which I think is unique in the industry. Most people are solely focused on growth by acquisition or recruiting methods, and that's something that has been talked about significantly. So I definitely appreciate that side of Intercap. But as you talk about Argyle and the solutions that you use, you started to get into changing your waterfall. Can you walk everyone through what your workflow is on and how you leverage Argyle solutions within that workflow?
Yeah, great question. Today we've reverse engineered it all the way to embedding it into our point of sale in Encino. Really, it's giving everybody who is a W-2 income earner the ability to capture that verification up front. That does a lot of things in our workflow today. It allows us to quickly identify those that have the ability to credential in, to quickly then make underwriting decisions on that income and employment so that we can cut down on cycle times. It also, to what Brian mentioned with legacy technology, that is substantially reduced our cost per closed loan. We know that upwards of about $100 per file is what our cost savings is. And so we figure, with about a 40% success rate with Argyle at, just moving it further up the workflow, that it's allowed for us to save tens of thousands of dollars a month. And it also just provides a more unique and favorable customer experience to our borrowers. So those have been, I would say, the two biggest, value propositions of adding it, into the process. I know a lot of lenders will add it in manually, but adding it into the point of sale, knowing we have a large percentage of W-2 income earners today, has given us a huge pickup.
Yeah, I think that's always scary for lenders to pull the trigger, and
It is.
especially if you have very low pull through percentages, but definitely see the value proposition there. Brian, let's flip the script just a little bit. Argyle believes that technology is more than a tool. It's a strategic differentiator, but staying ahead means evolving as fast or faster than the industry is itself. What are you focused on for the remaining of 2025 and into 2026? And I think you mentioned one of your up and coming products that we might all get excited about.
Cool. Yeah, happy to jump in. So, a couple of things that we're focused on. One is, we talked a little bit already about integrations. Jameson and the Intercap team are using us out of Encino, which is awesome. One of the directives that we have is we want to be embedded, and have this kind of make sense for where operators are kind of performing their functions today. So whether that's for loan officers embedded in the point of sale, operations, or closing in the loan origination platform or LOS. So we've been very intentional about building this into as many, kind of point of sale and loan origination platforms as possible, just to, one, make it very easy for clients to turn us on and adopt us. But then once they do that, then it's already embedded into the system that they are, already working out of. So we've done a lot of investment on that this year, and we'll continue to invest in that into the future. The second point to, what you mentioned, Jody, around products. So, recently, I guess it was in the summer in June, we announced and started to launch our product with banking. And so folks, actually, Jameson and the Intercap team are using both our connected payroll and connected banking in the point of sale today. So what that gives them is the ability to, you kind of have two horses in the race to be able to get this, this verification. But obviously banking provides both assets and, in some cases, that single source validation where you can get income and employment verification as well. And then the third product that we just announced last week, we're calling Doc VOI. Really what this has meant is kind of a backup to if the customer does not connect with payroll or their bank, this is another method to get a low cost verification prior to going to some of those legacy providers that are much more expensive. So what we're doing today is, taking the documents that you already collect in your process, we're OCRing those, that could be pay stubs and W-2s, and then we're hitting the Freddie AIM check verification endpoint and coming back with a report that gives you monthly qualifying income and rep and warrant relief on that income calculation. Soon to be, we're in the process of adding Fannie, but they're still in the process of kind of building that for the wage earners. That will come over the next kind of quarter or two. But that's a really useful tool as a backstop to be able to, just kind of serve more of those applications with these low cost solutions, again, before you have to kind of get to things that are more expensive. So
yeah,
that's,
and that's amazing. Like, you mentioned meeting the clients where they are. You're meeting the loan officer where they are in the point of sale. You're also meeting them around, there really are no more excuses, right? That you can get verification of income up front. So what if they want to go old school and provide you the documents? Then with your W-2 wage earners, you still can get that income but it's also meeting the home buyer as the client where they are as well and where their comfort level is. So I love the
Exactly.
concept and, you know, the belief that you can meet both the loan officer, the client, and the home buyer, the client, where they're at, and helping lenders do that is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jameson, how are you thinking about Argyle's new offering, just being a week old, and how that you'll integrate it into your existing workflow?
You know, we've known it's been on the docket for a few months now. I think it's really maybe the best way to describe it is the agencies are starting to come out with direct tools, right, to verify income, but this just makes it even that more seamless, that much, you know, user friendly, I would say. And so from a user perspective, primarily like internal ops, and then, you know, forward facing to the consumer, that's the part I would say that we're most excited about. It's that we also know from our experience with Argyle that like as we roll it out, the post implementation support from their team has really made it successful. I think in today's world, one thing we see is a lot of service providers have historically focused on kind of two of three key aspects of like what technology does to enhance the process, right? Usually it's the customer experience, it's the efficiency. Does it cut down on cycle times? Does it give you data integrity? And then the last one is really the cost savings. But up to this point, I feel like a lot of service providers have focused on the first two, right? Like they'll come in and they kind of ask you to commit up front before you see the true impact to your bottom line or the true impact into your workflows. And inevitably what happens is you sign a contract, sometimes 12 to 24 months. It increases your costs. It, you know, makes all these claims to provide all these other things, but then it's really hard to quantify in some way or another. And so the cool part about like Argyle is we've already gone through it, right, with two other, you know, of their key products, verification and employment, the VOIE, as well as the verification of assets. And having both of those embedded into our point of sale and having that post-implementation support has given us the confidence to know like whatever we do here, we know that we get the right support. We have the right team to be able to take that, you know, information back as the feedback loop so that we can make it part of the process and therefore, you know, make it a better experience for our customer. And that's probably the biggest thing that stood out, right? Like is one, and like prior to Argyle as a customer, I had worked with some other verification providers, but I remember, you know, Thomas and Fred, they're actually both locally here. Thomas reached out and it was just one of those like, look, we're going to put our money where our mouth is. We look at month-to-month contracts. We don't have minimums. It's like you only pay for what you successfully, you know, what accounts are successfully connected. And so it just really showed, look, we're only going to charge you for what we know you need. And also, therefore, there's also that cost savings aspect, which we can get behind. And so it's one of those things like if you're not in that space today, trying to figure out how to like move the technology forward and be innovative for your customer experience, because we all kind of expect it in today's world, right? Like all three of us, to an extent, we don't expect somebody to hand us a paper application, talk through the process at our desk. Like somebody somewhere, I'm hoping you're sending a link. There's verification options available. You're really making this seamless for every generation for that matter. And that's the part that I think is exciting for us is they're doing all of the things, they're taking all of the steps to figure out like what's next, what products or what problems can we solve for the consumer. And that's where I'm excited about the product, just generally speaking, and knowing they're the right counterparty to go into battle with is the part that I know it's certainly going to solve a problem there. So.
You definitely said a mouthful when you're talking about implementation, change management, and adoption. Everyone is trying to crack the nut about how to get those three working in unison. And Brian, can you share some of the stats on consumers click through and conversion rates across the client base. And if you have that information available on Intercap, do you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think what we see, depending on the product, is a little bit different. I think on the payroll side, if you're using it in the point of sale, I think Jameson mentioned, around kind of 40% is the conversion rate that we typically see like out of Encino. If you're using it later in the funnel, it's a little bit higher. So out of Encompass, it's usually in the kind of 50 to 55% range. And I think it's just obviously a little bit lower in the point of sale just because you have some just application drop off and shoppers, in general. Banking is around, call it 60% or so in the point of sale, and can be up to 70%, out of the loan origination platform. And then, we have a couple customers that are kind of using all of these products together, banking, payroll, and the Doc VOI product. And in those cases, what we've seen is they're able to serve or kind of verify up to almost 80% kind of total of the applications coming through with these low cost methods before, again, going to those, more expensive providers. So, the combination of all three of these is creating a waterfall of sorts that allows you to verify customers upfront in the process. Those numbers I mentioned, Intercap is kind of in line with those, which is great to see. And then, just how do we kind of get that adoption, to that conversation? Part of it is, some of the steps that they've taken, which is, automating this and putting it into the point of sale, which is the way I think about that is like, it's a great baseline starting point. You're meeting the customer where they are. They're comfortable, kind of giving information at that point. So it's a great place to start. And then we typically layer on trainings and talk tracks for the different personas that are going to use our product and interact with customers about it. And so that allows you to then optimize even above that kind of baseline, like, hey, everyone just sees it, but maybe doesn't know what to do with it. Now, we can kind of layer on the trainings and talk track above that.
I want to point out one piece that you said, because I think it relates to any technology that's being used in the mortgage industry. It's that you automate it. If you want people to do the same thing consistently, the only way to get that consistency across your teams, because everyone's going to have their own twist on it. Many times we've seen that loan officers will sell themselves out of it, which then they sell the borrower out of going through the verification process. So I think that, anything that you want consistently done and it's a repetitive process that you can automate it. Remove the human from that piece of it, because they are going to reflect some type of emotion or previous experience that they're basically going to convince the consumer not to engage.
Right.
And I'm really shocked that there's only a 10% difference between running it early in the process and then running it later in the process. And what that says to me is, why not run it in the beginning? And if you have that fallout, at least you have the peace of mind on 10% less. You have the peace of mind of knowing what that calculation is, knowing that that is out of the way and overdone with very early in the process. But I don't think that, it really, it doesn't matter what technology you're talking about. People ask me about implementation, adoption, traction every day. And I think that I always say, if you want people to do things repeated and consistently, do it for them, which means automate that process for them. So well done to both of you and your partnership and making that happen. And Jameson, you shared a lot of statistics with the group. And if you don't mind, will you just recap the cost savings that you've had, conversion rates? Because sometimes if you're not watching for it, so this is my hint, if people want to take a note, get ready, because Jameson's going to give his real world case study on return on investment.
Yeah, so the ROI for us is a couple things. When we bifurcate this out and just look at files where we have a successful verification using Argyle, we're saving over $100 a file compared to legacy technology or legacy verification technology. Certainly a substantial number. Like we said, depending on volume, I mean, our volume can range from, let's say, 380 units a month to 500 plus units a month. Like I said before, it's tens of thousands of dollars to our bottom line for Intercap. In addition to that, we know that, and the other reason we don't worry about embedding it into the point of sale, like legacy technology, is legacy technology traditionally would charge you off of everything, right? Where Argyle charges you off of the usage and the successful connection to those accounts, which we feel confident that it's high enough that we can definitely justify moving it forward in the process and giving that consumer the ability to select it. And if they choose to go down the verification process and credentialing in and giving us that access, that it's them choosing that it, embetters the experience for them, which we feel like if I'm the consumer, I would want to have that option as well. And I love that you have technology providers like Argyle taking the lead. And then statistically, we know that like over the last 3 years, and Freddie Mac came out with this, is the cost has increased by about 35%. So cost increase for IMBs like Intercap has increased, and we see it everywhere, right? We see it on the credit side, and we see kind of the battle right now between FICO and the bureaus, and just trying to find ways for us to reduce our costs to manufacture so that we can, of course, continue to be financially stable, but at the same time offer all these unique value propositions through technology to the consumer. And I think that's kind of it's the juggling act for any mortgage company in today's environment, right? Which is really understanding where you need to be from a cost to manufacture perspective, but also making sure that you're doing everything through innovation to stay up with the times and give the consumer what they expect in today's age. And so I would just say, like, yeah, $100 a file is substantial, right? And we're doing other things because, of course, you have reps and warrants and D1C with Fannie Mae and AIM with Freddie Mac, that like we understand there's certainly value there. But I would say the cost aspect is more key for probably any IMB, even over the reps and warrants. Like, I probably the best legacy example of that is like your 10-day verbal verification of employments right before closing, right? And a lot of teams would just kind of hit the easy button on those verifications prior, not even realizing what the cost to that bottom line of the transaction was. And so we've even gone back almost old school where it's like, look, we're going to do, Argyle and this, and this. And if those things aren't satisfied, then we'll proceed to option 5, which is the legacy technology option. But it's just like being intentional with those workflows. It's also like, I think you said it best, Jody, is like, it's making sure we're having the right conversations internally about how it impacts the consumer experience. Therefore, our loan officers are talking about it. They're involved in the monthly calls where we're talking about the data and who's successful, and then we're using that as case study to help other LOs be successful with it. And so it's certainly an adoption that needs to take place at the top. We know that it begins with us as leaders, and the expectation that this, we know confidently, will serve your customer and add value to the transaction. So I would say those probably more than anything is reducing costs. We're still trying to figure out the cycle times because it's new in the organization. But once we have that historical data, I'm pretty sure probably by this month we should have that with Argyle to look at like how it's reduced the cycle time. But as you know, sometimes that's driven by more things than just the verification alone. So it may take us some time to build that. But
yeah. Those are amazing numbers. I do imagine, Jameson, that because you are so well known in Utah and have that reputation, you might have a little bit of a higher conversion ratio just because of the trust and the name recognition within the industry. But I still think that there's a tremendous opportunity for anyone looking for to automate their verification services and, leverage meeting consumers where they are. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's a wrap. Brian, I hear that you and a whole crew from Argyle are going to be at MBA Annual.
Yes.
Amy's going to drop in the chat, if she hasn't already, your link to connect. So if you want to connect with the Argyle team, please do so. In the chat is the link to connect. Jameson, I am not going to give people your contact information. I know what it's like to be a lender at NBA Annual. But I look forward to meeting you in person. So Faith and I will keep you to ourselves. We won't hand out that contact information. So that's a wrap on today's episode of The SIP, sponsored by Argyle, Brian, and Jameson. Thank you both so much for your insights and being a part of this growing conversation. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Your curiosity and engagement help fuel our community. We'll be back. We are taking next Tuesday off for those who are listening. So we will be back Tuesday after, I believe that's like the last day of October, or maybe the next to last day of October. But we'll be back then, and hope to see many of you at NBA Annual. Look us up, and we will hopefully have many great insights to come the end of October and through the end of the year. I know we have a stacked calendar for the SIP. Looking forward to it. So cheers. And until next time on the SIP, we will see you later.
Hi, guys.
Thanks all.